Good morning. Thank you for afternoon, something along those lines. Going to give people just a couple minutes to get on. I'm going to be jumping back and forth, as you can tell. We're having a slight snowstorm, nothing too big, but everything in the state about decided to shut down today. So Pastor is at Bike Week, which is pretty exciting. A little bit jealous with about 6 inches on the snow here. I think it'd be wonderful to have some heat, catch a tan, but if I caught a tan, I might not show up in the dark light. So you guys lucked out. But we're going to get right into it today. I don't want to waste a lot of time, and I don't know if we'll take the full hour. I got a couple things that I've heard that really helped impact me and how I did things and how I'm doing things. Not that I have it perfected, but pretty excited about everything that's happening right now. I want to invite you, though, before we get into it, to Empowering Pastors Conference. That'll be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this coming week. It's not too late to sign up. It's not too late to bring other people on staff. It's not too late. I know we get caught up being busy, but I want to encourage you. The greatest investment you can make is in yourself. Your church needs you to be the better you. You need some principles to grow. You don't have to be in a city of 1 million people to have an impactful church. And that's the goal. How do you have an impactful church? That's what Pastor wants to invest this year at Empowering Pastors Conference. It is the blueprint of heaven. Because if you can follow the blueprint of heaven, you're going to get everything that you need. Good morning, Nicholas. Today I'm on this side of the camera, so it's nice to see you again here today. If you're on, I want to encourage you to go ahead and hop on the chat. It's over on the right-hand side, and let your voice be heard. And I'm excited. I think it's going to be a wonderful day. Today I want to talk about your faith and your expectations, because I think they're very, very powerful things that tie in together. Now, if I was at the church, I'd have a better example. But I would like to show you quickly on Sophia, my daughter's drawing magnetic thing, how most people operate their life. As time and faith collaborate, your faith should rise over time. But unfortunately, sorry guys, I like the guy on BBC the other day where the kid showed up. Unfortunately, instead of our faith rising with our time, I've seen a lot of people, their faith rises, and over time it drops down and it cuts off. And today I want to talk about why I think that happens and some ways to avoid it in your own life. Because what happens most of the time, instead of our faith rising with time, our faith is based on our experiences. And it's pretty crazy, and our expectations are not governed by our faith anymore, but they're governed by what we experience in life. So instead of our life rising like this, what we see is peaks and valleys and frustration. And I don't want to see people live like that. And we know that God has called us as ministers, as marketplace people, as followers of Christ. We've been called not to go up and down, but to go from glory to glory, which is an increasing, ever-changing, ever-moving kind of statement. So let's just pray real quick, and we'll get into these notes. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for today. I pray that we will see a mighty shift in our faith, that our faith will rise, that our expectations will rise, that we will not be burdened by our experiences, but Lord, you will see your kingdom increase by the obedience of your people. In the mighty name of Jesus, let the snow melt quickly. Maybe send some snow to Pastor in Florida. It's probably not going to happen. Amen. But today I just want to talk to you about your faith and your experiences. And I want to lay the groundwork really quick out of Psalm 75, verse 6 and 7 before we get too far in. It says, for no one on earth from east or west or even from the wilderness should raise a defiant fist. It is God alone who judges, and catch this, he decides who will rise and who will fall. Ultimately, promotion is from the Lord, and it will not be given to the slothful. If you read your Bible, if you read Psalms and Proverbs, you see mighty rebukes against those who are lazy and slothful. And I just want to encourage you. We see success out of people in the world. We see success out of people who don't serve Jesus often, but their success is not always health. And I want to encourage you, if the Lord brings increase, if you do everything you know you ought to, if you operate in faith, if you keep pushing forward in obedience, you're going to see the Lord bring increase in your life. And that's where we will see healthy, good growth. Now, we see this principle all throughout the Bible, but I want to focus real quick on David and Goliath. We know this story out of 1 Samuel chapter 17, and it's one that's been spoken about a lot, but it's pretty crazy because David and Goliath, they're two drastically different people. Goliath, we know he was a war champion. He was a giant. His spear, his sword, everything he had was just oversized. He was overpowerful. And honestly, he scared the Israelite army. God's people were scared of Goliath. And now David, on the other hand, he wasn't believed in by his own people. He was mocked by Goliath, but in faith, he won the battle. Now, we see multiple different things come into play with this. There was obviously a battle, but there's expectations from different angles. David had an expectation he was going to destroy Goliath. And Israel had probably an expectation that David was going to be destroyed by Goliath. And David had full expectation that he was going to step in. He said, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine?" He was operating in the faith of God, saying, "I'm not going to back down. I know my expectation is to win this." And he was inexperienced in it, right? But even so, even though he'd never experienced it, he still stepped into the battle and said, "I know my God has given me this victory." See, there's power in unrealistic expectations. And that's something that we need to operate in. We need to have unrealistic expectations. Pastor and the pastors call them big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAGs. And they're very important because, A, they require faith. And I'm sorry, but anything that you can do on your own that does not require God is too small, and it's actually not God. But they also do some other things. It makes you find your limits. And I think as a leader, one of the things we have to be doing is finding our limits and then stretching those limits. The next thing they do is it makes us stretch our limits as to who God has really created us to be. As I promise you, there's more inside of you than you know right now, and you're stronger than you think you are in Jesus, and you have more anointing, and there's more for you absolutely buried. I was listening to a story, and there was a man, he ran like a group competition, like 70-mile run. And his group got passed by one single man. He wasn't running in a group. He wasn't doing anything. And he blew by everybody. He found out the man was a Navy SEAL and said, "You know what? You're going to come live with me." He paid him to come live in his house for a month and teach him how to tap into his full potential. And it's wild because he said the first day he got up and he said, "I want you to do 10 pull-ups." So he did 10 pull-ups. He said, "All right, I want you to do 10 more." So he did like 10 more pull-ups. And by the last one, he was dying. And he got down. He's like, good. Now you're going to do 100 more pull-ups. He's like, "Man, I'm dead. I don't have any more." He said, No, you're going to do them one at a time. So for 100 more pull-ups, he did them one at a time, just proving that there's more inside of him than already was. And if there's more inside of us naturally, how much more supernaturally is inside of us? And I believe that unrealistic expectations, moving in faith, stretching limits is going to help pull those things out of us. And the next thing it does, if you're doing all those things, you're going to reach places that you never expected. See, unrealistic expectations are a powerful tool in business and in ministry because it does not allow us to stay at one place. Now, number one, if you're taking notes, I want to talk to you about your expectations. What expectation have you allowed life to bring down to your level of experience? And I think this is one of the greatest issues in leadership is we allow our experience to cap our expectations. And it's very dangerous. And we know expectations are a strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. So it's saying, this is what I've ironed my belief out to be. And our expectation is generally always set based on our last experience, is it not? How many times have we gone to a restaurant and it's been amazing food and we really enjoyed it, and then we go back and the food's not good at all. And in fact, it's awful. We did that for our honeymoon. We went to a place in Miami called Shuckers, and it was right on the bay, and it was beautiful. It was great food. And I think we went back the next year or 2 years later, and we're like, man, I'm going to Shuckers because it was a great experience. And we went, and it was awful. And we have not been back because our last experience laid our expectation for that restaurant, and we're not going back. And while it might not be fair to them, that was our experience, and that's now our expectation. And oftentimes we get into an inertia in situations where our drive isn't what it used to be because our experience was different than our expectation. So I think what we do often is we allow our expectations to set the experience, the ceiling on it, instead of our faith overlapping and over jumping and taking it to a new place and a new spot. Instead of seeing things as challenges, we look into our past and our previous attempts to make a decision. See, if your past is always going to be a marker, then you're always going to look back and be capped on what God can truly do and what he really wants to do. We see things all the time. Well, I failed last time, or, well, I didn't get the return that I had expected, or, well, last time it was more work than I bargained for, or I'm not going to that restaurant. See, we can go through all of these things where our past experiences or our previous attempts will put a cap on our expectations for right now. But I want to let you know that you need to have unrealistic expectations. And because if we don't, it's easy to slip into our experiences. And if we slip into our experiences, this is how we die. This is how we don't see growth. This is where we get capped off. This is where we stop operating in faith. See, organizationally or personally, if we slip into experience, you will see death inside of it. When your standards die, growth will stall, and anything not growing will eventually die from stagnation or have things cut off. And unfortunately, that's where I see a lot of people. I see a lot of people living in towns like Horseheads with churches, and they're saying, well, you know what, realistically, it could never happen because there's only 6,000 people in our town, or anything like that, or businesses saying, well, there's only 85,000 people in our county, there's no way I could have a multi-million-dollar business, and I couldn't do this and this and this, because they see their experience or other people's experiences in the past, and they cap their expectations. But I want to let you know that honestly, our expectations, man, they got to be driven by faith. It can't just be what we naturally see by our natural eyes when we serve a supernatural God who has supernatural things set up and set in line for you to do and to touch. See, I think our expectations, they ought not to ever be on our experiences, but they should be on faith in what God has spoken. And if we do that, we'll always see our expectations actually rising with our faith, because truly, expectations are an internal target, are they not? You have beliefs and ideas and desires that you've internalized. And honestly, they should always be shifting and moving. Because even the failure of having expectations and hitting them is never then rising your expectations, but being happy about what you've already done. There's pastor calls it a dissatisfied satisfaction, that I'm happy I'm here right now, but I'm not happy because I know there's still more for me. And see, we need to have a dissatisfied satisfaction inside of our expectations, even of ourselves. If we're just okay with doing a little bit and having it occur, then we're never truly going to see good growth, true growth. I see this a lot even in preaching. where I have an expectation of what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do, and then I step away and it's like, man, I missed the mark. I should have done better. But see, it's honestly healthy, because if our expectations are rising, that means our faith has to rise. And if our faith is rising, then we're going to be forced to stretch. If we're forced to stretch, we have to rely on God even greater. And if we rely on God even greater, he's going to come through and even greater things. See, if we never have more to give, then we're not really growing. I think you're going to have more to give by rising the level of expectation that you have, because it's going to create a growth curve in your life. See, we cannot live, and I'm going to say this 100 more times, we cannot live based on our experiences. We have to live based on our expectations. And if our expectations are the marker of our life, then our experiences are always going to be shallow. But our experiences should always be rising, and our expectations should always be rising. We should always be stretching to go deeper and do more. And if you're a business, to make more money and make a greater impact on your community. And if you're a pastor, to have a greater expectation of deeper discipleship and a deeper reaching of our community with the gospel of Jesus Christ. But if our expectations are not going to rise, then we're going to get stagnant ourselves. See, we need to have a growth curve, so we need to be asking ourselves consistently, did I prepare? Was I authentic? Was I clear? Did I really pour out? Did I pre-plan? Did I delegate? There's so many questions we can ask inside of curving and looking at our expectations of ourselves and if they're growing. Now, I need to give you a little bit of a scapegoat. We can talk about expectations, and man, we all have great expectations. I hope you expect that you're going to be a multi-billionaire. Or if you're a pastor, that you're going to have the biggest church in America. Or whatever your expectation might be, we all have this superhero image of ourselves, don't we? Where we look at it and say, if I were to reach that, if I were to get to that level, I know that God would be happy with me, which that's a lie. If you're being obedient, God's happy with you right now. But we have this super image, or this superhero image of ourselves we've created of our end person. Like, this is where I'm going to be. Like, if you grew up playing sports games and you could create a character, like your character is 99 overall on everything, even the things that don't even really matter. And that's our image we have of ourselves. But can I tell you, you're always going to kill yourself if that's your image you have, because ultimately you're never going to be there right now. You'll get there and you're on the road, but you need to give yourself some more time. I think we should have those unrealistic expectations of ourselves, but I think we also need to have some realistic expectations in time. Now, don't let time be your excuse, because oftentimes I hear people, well, I just need some more time, but they've been in ministry for 45 years and they've never been obedient and they've never spent time in prayer and fasting. Or people who've been in business who've just made really, really, really bad decisions. And, well, I just need more time to develop. No, you've just made poor choices. Don't let time be your excuse. But Rome did take time to build. And your expectations, man, they're going to set a standard and a course for you to get there. And I think that our standard needs to always be rising, that just because I did something last week or last month doesn't mean that I've made it. It means I took another step towards my destiny. And those experiences I had in the past, they don't determine where I am right now. But in fact, my expectations do. And my expectations are going to be driven by faith in God. And it's crazy, because if your expectations are rising, it's never going to feel like it should, right? It's always going to feel like there could have been a little bit more. And it's good if you feel like there should have been a little bit more, because it shows and it recognizes that your standards are rising. I think many people live below standard, even their own standards, not even the world's standards, but their own standards. See, when we started conference, Upper Conference, I'll take the free plug right now for myself, July 28th through the 30th. It's 100% free conference, and we're moving to the first arena this year. And I'm excited about what God is doing. It costs us $20,000. And said God said it's going to be free. Said, all right, God, we're going to trust you. And at that time, $20,000 seemed like a lot of money. But then 40,000 came. And now we're at 60,000. And it might seem big, but that's the new standard. And what happened in the past is great. It's proof that God's going to do it, and having unrealistic expectations and matching it with faith that God's going to come through. But man, that's a new standard. And I think oftentimes we need to raise our standards, because too many people are okay with having the same amount of people that they've had because they have a comfortable salary and that they're comfortable with where they're at, and they're comfortable with their time invested, and they're comfortable with the amount of business they have, and they're comfortable without all the pressure. But if we're just comfortable, are we ever going to really reach where God has called us to reach? Sometimes I look back and I think, how comfortable was Abraham? Or how comfortable was Noah? How comfortable was Moses? How comfortable were these giants of the faith? Or even naturally, like how comfortable was Steve Jobs and what he was doing? The amount of ridicule he accumulated from his wild ideas that have now shaped where our technology is. How comfortable have all of these people been who had unrealistic expectations and took steps forward? Now, I think that people that never really grow are people who only do things that they're asked to do, right? If you're a business owner, who are you going to give a promotion to? The guy who shows up on time, who does his work, who cleans up his area, who follows through with his customers and then goes home? Or are you going to give that promotion to the guy who shows up 15 minutes early, cleans his area, then helps somebody else, who calls his customer, then recruits new customers? See, those who just do what's expected will never truly see good growth. They'll sustain, but they'll never see exponential growth. Those who are going the next level are going to always go a little bit farther. Those who go above expectations are going to produce a little bit more. And I think we need to exceed people's expectations. There's a man named Robin Sharma I've been listening to. He's got a free podcast. They're called Mastery Sessions on YouTube. And I love them. Some of them are a little bit weird. He's the kind of guy who likes to walk outside through the woods with his shoes off and watch the sunset. And that's not how my life works. So I can't always identify with him. But he has this amazing principle called the 10X principle. Everything you do, try to give 10 times what they had expected in return. And if you can do this, you're always going to be pouring out. And if you're pouring out, people are going to want to be catching what you're pouring out. And I'm telling you, people are going to want to have these things. And people are going to recognize what you're doing. And they're going to recognize the greatness of what you're pouring out. And they're going to recognize the expectations that are there. And you're not just going to be in the industry. And you're not just going to be ministering to people. Because we're both sides on this. It's business and church. And you're not just going to be inside of it. You're going to be setting the new expectation. And if you can set an expectation, if you can raise that expectation, the experience they'll have at the other business, the experience they'll have in the world will far underwhelm the expectation that the church has set or your business has set. I think we need to stop having low standards, and we need to produce 10 times everything everyone else expects. And how do you do that? I think we see an amazing example of it in Acts 3. When Peter was going, and we see the beggar, and he's sitting out, and he says, "Oh, do you have something to spare?" And they look at him, and he says, "Silver and gold I do not have." And the man gets healed. The man had an expectation for silver or gold or something worth monetary return, but he got something that was greater. See, he disappointed, but he exceeded the man's expectations at the same time. Sometimes you have to disappoint someone's need to honor God's standards. And I think if we are going to give 10x in everyone else's life, we have to disappoint sometimes their needs and give them God's standard, because God's standard will always supersede the standards of man and the needs of man. God's standard needs to be our standard. We need to shoot for that excellence. See, I see a lot of people who are world class who don't serve Jesus. In the church, I see them being just okay. We need to produce world class in every single thing we do. And it's not always, do not always do what people want, but in fact, we have to build for what God desires. And if we can operate in building what God desires and setting godly standards and setting them higher than the world, we're going to build some extraordinary things, and we're going to surpass our experiences, and we're going to live on expectation that's backed by faith that's unrealistic. And I'm telling you, you need to be unrealistic. You need to say some things that make your accountant shudder. You need to say some things that makes the devil laugh. And as you're doing it, you can snicker back at him as you're stomping his nasty kingdom in the face. But I want to let you know, if you're just okay with what's happened in the past, if your experiences are going to shape your expectations, you'll never see good growth. You'll just go through life living content. And I don't want to just be content. I want to have a dissatisfied satisfaction that I know there's more inside of me, and I know that God has greater on the other side, and I'm going to push forward, and I'm going to push through, and I'm going to get what's laid out there because God has it. And if I'm not going to get it, I will leave the world empty and void of what he has prepared and planned. Now, here's another thing that other people do. Number 2. What is it that you've never really shown us by setting the bar low? Now, I think a lot of people are guilty of this one. They set the bar low in order to look good and exceed the baseline that you've set without much effort, so everyone thinks that they're killing it. Maybe that's you. Maybe you set the expectation so low so you know you'll always beat it, so you can look good. But can I tell you how dangerous this is? Because it kills your potential, because it robs your true effort. And it fools us that you aren't as powerful as you really are. I want you to catch that. I'm going to read that again. This kills your potential because it robs your true effort and fools us that you aren't as powerful as you really are. That's a scary thought, isn't it? What if you never really give your true potential? Yeah, you'll look good to people, but you'll never feel good or satisfied in your own heart. That's scary, isn't it? That a lot of people operate like this. They set standards low so they're never let down. And some people never risk because they don't want to fall short and grow. They would rather shrivel and look like they're growing instead of failing. No. And their expectation has been placed downward to the lowest level of effort. And if your business operates like that, how much more money could you have by your employees stepping up or you stepping up? If you're in the ministry, how many more people could you affect? How many more souls could be saved and discipled? How much of the devil's kingdom could you destroy this week, this month, this year, this decade? If you stop setting the bar low because you're scared of failure. See, if you grow in ability, your standards should grow too. And if you're living on expectations and not experiences, you're going to have to grow. And your standards are going to have to grow, which means you cannot continue to set the bar low and pretend like you're killing it when in fact you're only hitting 10, 20% of your potential. Because you're not happy at the end of the day. You're not satisfied. I think there's a satisfaction in being tired at the end of your day, knowing that you've really worked hard. And if you never get to that point, you'll never understand the satisfaction it brings knowing you've given that day everything that you have. The question is, what forces our expectations to grow, right? I think there's a couple questions that we need to ask ourselves, and go ahead and write these down. I think sometimes after a big event, maybe after you preach, or at the end of your month, if you're in business, or the end of the week in business, you need to ask yourself these questions. They're very simple questions, but you need to be honest. Was that my best? Simple, right? Was that my best? The next question is, do I like my best? I want to talk about that for a second, because if it was your best, but you don't like your best, you have to do something about it. And I've made a decision in my heart that I'm not going to like my best. I'll be satisfied with my best, but I'm going to force my best to get better. Now, growth always has pain and frustration, right? I don't know if you remember as a kid, or if your kids have gone through this yet, but growing pains, man, I remember sometimes waking up in the middle of the night and my leg would be completely like cramped out. Like it felt like it was being squeezed by 12 anacondas at the same time. And that hurt so bad. But going through that pain forced me to grow, right? See, growth always has pain and frustration, but don't get it mixed up, because oftentimes when we feel pain and frustration, we mistake it for problems instead of what it really is. John 15 says this. It says, in every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me and I in you. Please don't mistake God's pruning for God's punishment. You might need to get more disciplined during his pruning. You might have some people taken out of your life during his pruning. You might have some of those indulgences taken out during his pruning. You might have some things taken from your life as God is pruning you. But look, he's not punishing you. He's preparing you for the next place, because growth always has pain and frustration, because it requires a new level of discipline. Those who've been corrected the most rise the highest, and those who get up the most stand the longest. There should be a gap between was that my best and do I like my best? Because in that gap is where you can grow. Was this my best? Do I like my best? There should be this middle ground. And that allows a place for you to grow. Paul said, I press toward the upward call, saying, I know there's more. I know there's greater. I know I got to take more steps. But if you're best, and if you're okay with that being your best, I want to let you know that's where mediocrity comes in line. There's no gap for growth. It closes and creates mediocrity. I think that's where a lot of people get, is they hit their best once or twice, but they don't actually ask the question, was this my best? They live in mediocrity and comfort, but God has said there's even better that you have inside of you, and here's the gap. And in faith, I need you to take that gap, because a lot of people like mediocrity because they get a lot of praise from man. But the greatest reward is not other people's affirmation. It's discovering the new levels that God has placed inside of you. You can tweet that one if you want. But what forces that growth, right? Like, there has to be a driving force in between these two places. It can't just sit here. There has to be something in the middle. And I believe that that gap has to be filled with faith. We said it at the beginning, that there's power in unrealistic expectations because it requires faith. I want to talk about faith for just a minute. I want to build you up and encourage you. So I want to let you know that your life has value and God is going to use it mightily. You know that, right? Like, yeah, that's simple. That's it's pretty basic. I know my life has value, but I want you to really hear that today. Your life has value and God is going to use it mightily. Jeremiah 29:11. You know it, right? Say it to yourself real quick. For I know the plans that I have for you. Plans to prosper. Come on. Say it in your preacher voice. Get that in your heart. You're not here for mediocrity. You're here for greatness. God wants to use you mightily right where you are, and then he wants to expand your tent pegs. That prayer of Joab needs to be your prayer. Or Jabez. There you go. Number 2, if you want to operate in faith, you have to understand it. Hebrews 11:1 gives it right there, and I know it's basic. I'm not trying to insult your intelligence. I just want to remind you. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen. Now, faith is active and alive. The word assurance means confirmation of things unseen being done. So it's active confirmation. It says of things hoped for. Those things hoped for is those things that are divinely guaranteed, right? It's like the deed to my house. This is my house. No one's going to come up to me and tell me that this is not my house. This is mine. I will show you the deed. The things that are divinely guaranteed, the things that are hoped for, that's your deed to what God has placed. So as you're living in this place of, I might have done my best, but I know that God has greater. I know that my expectation was here and I hit it. Now it's here. Now I'm living in this gap. I know that God has divinely guaranteed that I'll hit it. I have the deed for it, so I have to take the steps towards it. It's the confirmation. It's the confirmation that I have this deed. I met with the lawyer. I signed the paperwork. It's here. I'm going to have another $1 million come through my business this year. Is that too much? Sorry. Raise your faith. Of evidence of unseen, the vision of it being completed, like a carpenter. What you cannot see, you will never get. Carpenters always start, right? With a game plan. They know what they're going to build. Let your faith know what it's going to build. Faith is the active confirmation of the divine guarantee of what you've seen that's been completed. Move forward in faith. Take and attack that gap with faith. So as you understand it, then you can activate it. Hebrews 11:2, for by it the elders obtained a good testimony. You obtain it with your mouth, right? David said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? At that point, he obtained it. He went and he talked to the king and said, I'm going to go kill this man because he's defying heaven's army, God's people. We also see that life and death, they're in the power of the tongue. And what you're speaking is what you will touch and what you will have and what you will be granted. Not only with your mouth, though, it needs to be with your actions. It's not just enough to talk it. David went and got 5 stones, stood up against him and launched it at his head, knocked him out, and cut his head off. Read the rest of Hebrews 11. They not only spoke things, but they took action forward. See, if you want to live in that gap, you got to know God has a mighty plan for you. You need to understand faith and you need to activate faith. And as you do so, you'll stop living by your encounters and your experiences, and you can live by expectations and faith. Here's the key. Your faith should determine your expectations. Your faith should never be based on your experiences. And your experiences should never determine your expectations. I want to say those 3 again. Your faith should determine your expectations. Your faith should never be based on your experiences. And your experiences should never determine your expectations. So here it is. In context to your expectations, are you escaping them? Are you embracing them? Or are you exceeding them? Are you escaping your expectations? Are you embracing them? Or are you exceeding them? And here's how you change your expectations, or here's how you deal with your expectations. Change them, create them, and clarify them. Very easy, right? I told you I was going to be a little bit quicker. I'm not as long-winded as Pastor yet. I'm about 1/4 of the way into the ministry. Is 3.5. He's gotten me by 3.5 times in ministry. So I'll catch up one day. But ready? Here's your homework. And you can pay it to me this week because I'm doing the teaching. I want you to answer the question earlier. Was this my best? I want you to look at your last week, whether it be your last week of business, your last week of ministry, and answer these. I'll give you 4 questions. 1, was that my best? 2, am I happy with my best? 3, am I escaping, embracing, or exceeding my expectations? And number 4, do I need to change, create, or clarify my expectations? I want to challenge you to operate in faith, not in experiences. And I want to challenge you to raise the expectations you have of yourself, of your ministry, of your business. And by doing so, remember what it's going to do, those 4 points that we started with. It's going to require faith. It's going to make you find your limits. It's going to make you stretch to who God has really made you to be. And it's going to allow you to reach places that you never expected. If you have any questions, now is a great opportunity. I know I have about a 30-second lag. Hi, Miss Julia. I love you guys. I was thinking it was canceled due to the office being closed. This class is canceled. No, but that's what I love about YouTube Live is you can go back and watch it. And I'm pretty excited about it. And I really pray that this is going to help some of you. I want to challenge you, not condemn you, to take steps farther, to do greater. I'm telling you, man, if you're in business or if you're in ministry, wherever you're touching, maybe you're a stay-at-home mom, raise those expectations because God's kingdom has greater in store for you than you could even imagine right now. Man, I just think about like Moses and Abraham and all these guys in the Old Testament, even New Testament guys who operated in faith. They didn't think in the moment like, hey, this is going to be written for people to talk about 2,000 years later, you know? They were just being obedient. They're operating in faith. And they did some things they never would have expected because of faith, because of expectations, and not being ruled by their experiences. So if I could just say one more thing, please live your life with your experiences or with your faith and your expectations rising. Please don't live the roller coaster of your expectations being determined by your experiences. I love you guys. Have a phenomenal day. Homework, you can send it to youth. No, never mind. You can send it to Cody R. Spencer at gmail.com. CodyRSpencer@gmail.com. And if you don't do your homework, my PayPal address is that same one I just gave you for your email. Have a phenomenal day. And I pray that you're going to do mighty things in faith this week.